Hello, this is a kind of special bonus video I've really wanted to do and add into my channel for a while. The most popular video on this channel, by quite a big margin, has been my Chapter 9 Autism ADOS-2 assessment, where I went through my experiences of getting the ADOS-2 as an undiagnosed autistic adult. It's been really striking, the amount of people who have said they got just as freaked out with not knowing what to expect out of the assessment as I did, or being riddled with anxiety about not being able to process and communicate challenges adequately when placed under the spotlight on the day. So this is a follow-up to that video, going through step by step the Royal College of Psychiatrists interview guide issued to psychiatrists assessing autism spectrum in adults in the UK. There may be other guides, but this is the only one I've been able to find available online, which I'll link to in this video description. It's the same document I've linked to multiple times in the comments of the Chapter 9 video, and I wish I found this prior to my own ADOS-2 assessment. It would have taken a lot of the uncertainty and anxiety out of the experience, essentially knowing the script the other person on the other side of the table was working from. I don't want this to be an epically long video, so I'm just going to fire right in. This guidance for autism assessors was issued in 2017. Like I said, I don't know if there's been updated guidance since, but the interview prompts and questions really closely follow and resemble what I was asked in my ADOS interview. So I'm assuming for the time being it's still a pretty good representation of the framework that's going to be used, that you're going to be assessed against. It's an interview guide for what's described as quote-unquote able adults with autism spectrum disorder, or adults of quote-unquote normal ability, in brackets Asperger's syndrome / high functioning autism. So problematic language aside, once again it's a condition, not a disorder, and the use of phrases like high functioning and ability are being phased out. But what that means is that this is what's used for suspected autism spectrum in adults with low support needs. It starts with I'm sorry about clearing my throat. I know that bothers some people when I do that, but my throat gets gunked up and I have to do it. I'm sorry. The guide. It starts with a guide on how to use the document for clinicians. So use it as a prompt, tool for information gathering, and adapt to your own interview style. It's not a guide to assess symptoms of co-occurring conditions like ADHD or psychiatric conditions, which is also problematic, as autism assessments really need to start being more holistic, as it's a condition which we've talked about before that rarely exists in isolation, hence the wide variety of presentations. But we are where we are, and this is what's very often used within the very narrow guide rails of current assessment conditions. One of the main guides offered to assessors at the start of the guidance is to assess how far back into childhood symptoms began causing an impact. It's a lifelong condition, and how those symptoms may have affected those around you. As to be fair, when you're an undiagnosed autistic adult who spent much of their life being unaware they were autistic, you're often unaware your behaviour or approaches to things or coping mechanisms may have been unusual, so that's very fair. This particular guide that I'm linking to and discussing colour codes its interview question prompts. So prompts in blue for people who know the subject, parents, partners, long-term friends. Questions in green for the subject themselves. It's the green questions that I'm focusing on, because my interview and the interviews of the majority of people I know who've had one were just one-on-one interviews, not with others. But if the provider you're using also interviews parents, partners or friends who are also freaking out, then follow the link to the document and look at the blue text, not the green. The two are actually a very similar range of questions. They're just kind of phrased a little bit differently. Anyway, the green interview prompts for the individual start with asking why you want the assessment for autism spectrum, what a diagnosis might achieve for you, and this 100% tracks with how my interview began, which I talked about in the Chapter 9 video, which was just getting clarity after that light bulb moment, followed by rabbit holing and a ton of imposter syndrome. Just wanting clarity and answers. The next prompts are asking if you feel different to other people and in what way, whether you work, and if yes, what sort of difficulties or stresses you encounter at work. So that's the kind of introduction, sort of icebreaker section. The next section is titled Reciprocal Social Communication and Social Interaction, and the questions here center around your ability to relate to people, to appreciate where they're coming from, pick up on social cues, and maintain friendships. What's described as the ability to read intuitively, easy for me to say, as opposed to kind of work out like an algorithm what others are feeling, thinking, and intend. So the question prompts here center around: do you enjoy social gatherings? How are you with small talk and social gossip? Are you relaxed, or do you find it stressful judging what to say or do in these settings? And also, how was this in the past? For example, did you spend your time during breaks or recess at school? How did you spend that time? Would you socialise, or would you seek solitude? Again, it kind of frustrates me reading this because it's so unnuanced when ADHD co-occurs with autism. But anyway, I'm not getting sidetracked. Basically, were you a bit of a loner, or have inclinations or feel comfortable being a loner? As an adult, do you socialise with work colleagues or try to avoid those situations? Do you sometimes sense that you've upset people or said the wrong thing but don't understand 100% why? Are you good at calming people that you're talking to if they're upset, or do you find other people being upset unsettles you because you don't know what to do? Do you feel the need to join in conversations, or are you content listening? An additional blue question prompts in this section for parents, partners, friends, if they're present. They're largely along the same lines, but also include: what does the subject, i.e. you, do at home at the end of the day? When they describe their day, do they just recount the facts or tell you about personal reactions and feelings? Are they keen to know how the other person spent their day, or is this conversation quite one-sided about them? Does the subject sometimes have difficulty interpreting sarcasm, taking things too literally, or not entirely understanding jokes? And if the person has upset someone, how good are they at smoothing things over? So these are all things you may well get asked about, and it's good to have thought about and reflect on these things in advance, so you're not getting bounced into an immediate response on the day, I think is the main thing. This is another thing that bothers me about autism assessments being done in one sitting. So a lot of us take longer to process and work through and reflect, right? And we'll come back with a lot of insight a day or two after a question's posed. But these assessments don't allow for that. It's, here's a question, answer it immediately, which is the exact thing we often struggle to do. But again, we are where we are, and hopefully videos like this might mitigate a bit of that and take at least a little bit of the stress out of what can feel like a bit of an interrogation of our soul, basically. The next subsection is about non-verbal communication, and the questions center around: do you tend to be an affectionate person? Do you enjoy hugs? What makes you feel depressed? And describe those feelings for someone who's never felt that. What makes you feel anxious or frightened? And describe those feelings for someone who's never felt that. What makes you feel happy? Describe that. I feel like this is dipping into alexithymia, which is a difficulty in recognizing and describing feelings and emotions. It's not the lack of feelings and emotions, just in the recognition and ability to describe them, which can very often be associated with autism. And I'm going to do a separate video specifically on that. But yeah, they do ask these questions. And honestly, this was the aspect of my own interview I think I struggled most with, being able to describe my emotions and feelings adequately. Other question prompts in this section are: how easy do you find it to tell how someone might be feeling by their facial expression or tone of voice? How easy do you find it to pick up when people are depressed, angry, bored by what you're saying, being silly or not being serious in their answers? Has Has misinterpreting people or misunderstanding their meaning been a problem for you at times? And additional blue questions for people who know you include, how does the person sound when talking? Is their conversation lively or can it be quite monotone? Can their speaking volume be either consistently too quiet or too loud? Are they easy to communicate with and convey feeling to using just eye contact or other non-verbal cues? The next section of the interview is about developing, maintaining, and understanding reciprocal relationships. How do you get on with people, basically? How easy do you find it to make and keep friendships? Other questions, did you have a lot of friends at school? Do you have work friends if you work? What's the difference between a friend and an acquaintance is a question I got asked. They also ask to describe some of your friends, what you like about them, what are they like as people, what are they interested in, do you join them in activities even if it's not something you're personally interested in, do you know or are you interested and engaged when something important or significant happens in their lives, like having a child or if someone close to them is ill? And this is about being honest, not giving the answers you think you should give because it's acceptable, and that can be difficult if you don't, because I think of the kind of the guilt and shame you might feel about not particularly caring about your friends' kids, for example, despite how clearly important they are for them. The next section is about restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviour, interests, or activities. And the question prompts in this section centre around thinking about whether you have any habits around repeated physical movements like hand flapping or rocking or twiddling things or flicking fingers that you do either when you're stressed or excited. And this was a major one for me. I'm a hand flapper ever since I was a kid, and I knew it was weird, so I hid it. I quite often sit on my hands. I just had no idea it was autistic until I hit 40. Other repetitive behaviours, do you arrange things in a particular way, for example lining them up, like God yes? Do you often repeat the same phrase to yourself over and over because you like the way it sounds? Do you like watching the same video clip or listening to the same tune over and over again? The next section is kind of along the same theme, and it's on insistence for sameness. So how organised are you? Do you like to do things in a particular way? For example, the way you arrange your things, the way you set routines to do things at a certain time in a certain way or in a particular order. Do you enjoy wearing the same clothes or eating the same food every day? How do you feel if something interrupts your routine so that you can't complete it? Does it really bother you or do you not mind? How do you feel when something familiar changes at home or at work? Do you like doing things spontaneously or do you feel a need to plan things out fully in advance so they feel more predictable? Do you like doing new things or going to new places, or can that unsettle you? Next section is restricted or fixated interests, things you intensely focus on that serve no purpose other than your own intense interest in them. And question prompts here include, basically, tell me about your hobbies or interests. Do you like collecting things? How much time do you spend on these? How do these hobbies, or do you do these hobbies on your own or with friends? How long have you had these hobbies? I could barely stop once they got me onto this, which I guess was a big tick for them. The next section, which I think is actually the final section, is around sensory reactivity, either hyper or hyposensitivity involving the senses. And question prompts include, do you feel, either now or in the past, particularly sensitive to the feel of things? For example, certain textures of clothing. Labels are a big thing for a lot of us. The touch of others, including being hugged. noise in general, or specific sounds that particularly bother you, bright or flickering lights, being particularly sensitive to heat or cold, or particular types of movement, for example, being spun around. Do you have particularly strong likes or dislikes with food? Are you particularly sensitive to pain, or notably desensitized to pain? Or do particular smells evoke strong reactions in you? And that's mainly it around the question prompts. It's a pretty short, focused assessment interview, really. I talked more about the weird child-focused activities they get you to do in the first ADOS video. But in terms of the interview, this is it. This is what they'll specifically ask you about using these specific prompts. The final section of the interview guide for clinicians is about observation, so how you are during the interview process. And the prompts for them to consider when observing you, like a lab rat, are whether your speech seems quote-unquote normal in terms of cadence, pitch, or volume, how your verbal tone is, whether it's flat or reflects your emotions, how easy and reciprocal you are with the flow of a conversation, how varied and expressive your facial expressions are, how comfortable you are with eye contact, how comfortable you are using hand gestures and other nonverbal communication to help convey your meanings, any evidence of hand flapping, playing with hands, or anything else that might be considered quote-unquote unusual or eccentric. There's then final boxes for them to make notes on evidence to support an autism diagnosis around reciprocal social communication and interaction, a box for evidence around restricted repetitive patterns of behaviour, interests, or activities, a box for assessment of impact on you or those around you of this evidence, and then their assessment outcome. And that is it for the diagnostic interview aspect of the ADOS-2. So a bit of repetition from my chapter 9 video maybe, but I hope this was a really useful bonus video for anyone going through the ADOS-2 in terms of more specifically what to expect in terms of the diagnostic interview. And again, the link is in the description to this video if you want to go through it in your own time. Like I said, I wish I'd had access to this ahead of my interview, not to try to game the system or anything like that, or answer in ways to get an outcome that you want, but just to know what to expect, to make the experience more predictable and to be able to consider and process properly in advance rather than feeling on the spot, and like the answers you give under a spotlight take on this huge significance which creates a lot of anxiety. I just reiterate the messaging from my first video on the ADOS. Just be honest, think about yourself on your worst days. Don't try to give the answers you think you should give, whether that's because you're masking and don't want to seem like you struggle, or on the opposite end, whether that's because you want to give the right answers to get the result you want. Bear in mind that autistic traits can at times overlap with trauma responses, so don't give answers that aren't true for you. Just be honest and let the psychiatrist or clinician or whatever assessor is doing the interview do their job. But I think being armed with what you're going to be asked about is of huge benefit, and yeah, I hope this video was helpful. So cheers, and see you next time.